I've decided that I do not think NaNoWriMo being in November is a good thing. I know plenty of people make it work for them. I've always found it just very tiresome to try to fit it into everything happening in preparation for all of the holiday nonsense in December as well as Thanksgiving in November, as an American. It seems like that's when all the family drama and all the weather, all of the everything, all of the busy season at work is just piling upon itself. And I just kind of decided I'm not even going to try NaNoWriMo anymore. If you're someone who loves it every year, you can make it work for you, you're willing to make those sacrifices, then I applaud you because I just no longer have the stamina. However, I don't know if it's growing as a trend or if this is just, I've happened to see two instances so similar to each other, alternatives to NaNoWriMo. And maybe this is starting to pop up in response to some of the, I know there was some controversy, NaNoWriMo embracing AI writing. This was after I'd already decided I didn't care too much about NaNoWriMo, so I didn't look much into it myself. Some writing friends made me aware of two different 90-day novel writing challenges. The first was hosted by AutoCrit. I had some initial interest in that. I thought they did a very poor job organizing it. The conceit of that challenge was you spend, I think it was 1 month planning, 1 month writing, and then 1 month editing. The end result is supposed to be a finished product. I made a brief attempt at that due to some not great things in life going on, and the fact that it started October and led into all of the things that I was trying to get away from in NaNoWriMo to begin with. I didn't get more than a few thousand words into it. There's a second 90-day writing challenge that I'm going to try considerably harder at. I think it starts this coming Monday, and it being in January, I think that's going to be a much more ideal time to do it. If I find myself making all the same excuses that I did for NaNoWriMo in January, then I should probably reconsider whether I'm just being super lazy and procrastinating. And on that note, I'm here to show some tools that I made last night when I was procrastinating from doing things that I otherwise really should have been doing. So this 90-day challenge is being hosted by The Company, which is a Christian writing site. I have not interacted with hardly anything they've done. I'm approaching this one because a friend suggested it, and there's a lot more guidance for this project, this challenge, than the previous one. So this is based on a book called The Novel Matrix by, I think it's Brad Pickett, who's the guy who runs that site. And first let's look at the template document. I just made this as a formatting template. It functions pretty poorly in its current state because there's not much of a difference between the heading 1 and the heading 2. I should probably fix that in the future. But I've decided for this challenge, I'm not going to let myself get bogged too much down by aesthetics and coziness and things looking nice as I sometimes have in the past when I'm just allowing myself to get distracted. So I'll be just working with this for the duration of the project. I'm using Atkinson Hyperlegible, which is my favorite typeface to use. It is an accessibility first typeface you can get for free from their site. I'll put a link in the description. It's a lovely typeface. I love it a lot. And let's see if I can remember the the shortcuts on the keyboard for this. Yeah. So the Novel Matrix book is one of my least favorite writing books that I've ever read, actually. It's a hybrid of bog standard 3-act structure stuff. Here, I'll collapse this stuff and we'll look at it. The decent stuff is the bog standard stuff. Its conceit is all great stories have, they're told in 3 acts, they have 5 conflicts, and they have 7 archetypical characters. You start by looking at your just some good world building questions. No issues here. One of the things I appreciate is you're asked to think, how does serendipity work in this world? How do things just spontaneously happen to good or bad people? I think this is important because a lot of new writers don't consider how frustrating it is for readers to see Deus Ex Machina just popping in to give characters a hand when it's convenient, or for characters to have dreams that just reveal the thing that they've been frustrated with for half the book. And if you think to yourself, what am I trying to tell the reader about the world by what seems to just be happening by luck or providence or the gods? I think it's just a good thing to keep in mind. 3 act structure, it's very bog standard. I've got the subtitle formatting to add the questions the book suggested I ask myself, where, of course, starting with a protagonist who has no agency, who is being forced by circumstances to answer the call to adventure, and will by the end of the story, says the novel Matrix, the protagonist must complete an impossible thing, whether that's impossible for everybody or just for them, based on their internal character arc. It's just important that they have that change. And this is, I know no real issues with that. If you're trying to write a monomyth hero's journey story, this is the way you would do it. And then we look at the conflicts in the story. Very just conflict driven. The protagonist needs to have internal conflicts between what he believes. His external conflict needs to be with a nameable character. And we consider how it will manifest, whether the protagonist and antagonist are in competition for the same thing, or if they have mutually exclusive goals. There's 2 opposing worldviews the protagonist must choose between. I appreciate, this is one of the few things I really appreciate about this book, is it was the 2 people groups in conflict. The idea that having multiple factions in a story who are opposed to each other is one of the more interesting ways in a story of having a bit of complexity in your world. It's bare minimum, but there are so many stories written by new writers where you really just have maybe the system and you have a handful of characters that are trying to oppose it or escape it, but embodying different philosophical ideas of your theme in entire people groups or large scale factions, which can have diversity and nuance within themselves, allows you to better develop that philosophical idea and that the philosophical conflict. My least favorite part is the section of the 7 characters. You have your very familiar, your mentor character, your sidekick. This is, as with like every writing book, of course, you have to describe everything in terms of Star Wars: A New Hope. And so you have your Obi-Wan guide, you have your R2-D2 sidekick, you have your Han Solo frenemy. My least favorite part of the book is the insistence that you need to have an object of affection character for your protagonist, somebody who is never helpful for your protagonist, has no agency, but is their suffering or something some of their choices prompt your protagonist to keep acting. Thought it was a little interesting that the book suggests that your object of affection can also be your antagonist character. Your antagonist is the victim of the system, and your protagonist is trying to rescue them. But I just strongly disagree that you need a character with no agency for your protagonist to try to rescue to have a good story. And the book is very explicit that this is necessary for a good story. Then you have your antagonist, who is a character. I do appreciate the emphasis in this book that the major components of your story are characterized, they're embodied in people. I think this is a very powerful tool, especially for new writers. It just makes things more interesting to read for most audiences. Then your mega antagonist, you apparently also need to have is just some force or person that represents everything wrong with the universe. I found it a little funny that this doesn't really exist in A New Hope that was being used as the example of this incredible story in this book. The Emperor, who is the mega antagonist, didn't really exist in A New Hope. I guess the Empire just serves this role here. And you might be wondering why I have all these things down on this document if I'm so critical of them, and I am going to try to adhere to these elements. I think it'll be a good exercise in discipline and creativity within restraints. I've had a big issue in the past when I try to stick to an outline of my own creation, just veering away from it immediately because I find it really hard to look at something I have on the paper and then organically develop that. I've tried quite a lot of different variations of outlining, including the snowflake method is what always seems like it should on paper work the best for me, but it never really seems to go that way. And based on previous projects that I've completed about a half dozen finished, at least novella length projects. Only 2 of them were about novel length, but I find it a lot easier to complete coherent projects when they're shorter length, and that tends to be what I enjoy reading anyway. I'd like to have the flexibility and freedom to work on larger things if I want to. I feel like that's a skill that I lack right now, and I feel like learning to employ more structure, not in terms of story structure as a concept, but in terms of being able to adhere to planning is a skill I need to develop. And then so I have those 2. And then this is a chart. I didn't make the chart. I found it on Reddit. I don't remember who posted it. I will share the original post in the description of this video. But I think it's a great chart. I don't necessarily agree with I'm not going to put my full recommendation behind this as the greatest world building chart ever created. I believe one of the comments on that Reddit post, for example, was criticizing languages being a subdomain of the species of your world, and just allowing yourself to adhere to that line of thinking can lead to some really dumb world building. I think the example used was why do all the elves speak Elvish? That's not how actual cultures work. And yeah, sure, I agree with that. I think this is a great visual starting point and kind of table of contents for your world building. In the throes of my procrastination, I added these boxes around each of these elements. I was really trying to avoid doing some social media management. And so what you can do is add a comment to any of these boxes, or you can link one of these boxes to another document or a section of that document, so you can set comments to either just write whatever content you need, or to leave yourself reminders for later for a certain category. Or you can just use this as a table of contents that leads to where all of these different elements are in your other document, but you see how they're all connected for your sake. And I suppose that's the end of my procrastination. In preparation of this 90-day novel challenge, I intend to post updates and more things that I come up with regarding this challenge over the next 90 days. Unlike the auto crit challenge that I mentioned earlier, where you're spending 30 days planning, 30 days writing, 30 days editing, this is purely a write one draft over. You spend a few days planning, I suppose, but you write your draft over almost that entire 90 days with dedicated 1 day a week for resting and doing no work to let your brain recover a bit, I guess. So we'll see how that goes. I have some ideas for a bit of a larger scale fantasy book than I've ever tackled in the past, and I think this will be a good challenge. With Nano having recently finished over a month ago now, I suppose, I'd love to hear about your Nano projects that you finished, or if you did the auto crit 90-day writing challenge, how that's going for you. Oh, is that over now? It might have started in October, so we may be done with it now. Regardless, I'd love to hear about that for you. And if you plan on doing this upcoming 90-day challenge, whether through the website hosting it or just on your own, I'd love to hear about that too. Thank you. Have a great day.